Thanksgiving was always a tense event in our family, but that year felt different from the moment I stepped through the door. My mother's eyes darted to my clothes, and my father barely glanced up from his drink. I was the eldest of three, but you'd never know it from the way they treated me, like I was the shame of the family, the outcast, the one who had let them down. My siblings were already there, seated around the grand dining table, each of them successful in their own right, at least by our parents' standards. Carolyn, the youngest, had just landed a job at a prestigious law firm. David, the golden child, had opened his second tech startup. And then there was me. I had quit a high-paying job 2 years ago to follow my dream of being a full-time writer, something my parents never forgave me for. They told me I was wasting my potential, throwing away my future. But for the first time in my life, I felt alive. I felt like I was doing something meaningful. I had even started gaining recognition for my short stories and was close to publishing my debut novel. None of that mattered to them. They only saw failure. As the turkey roasted in the oven and the scent of spices filled the air, I could feel the storm building. It was only a matter of time. The moment arrived when Dad stood up to make a toast, his glass raised high. He praised Carolyn's promotion, clinked glasses to David's latest app success, then turned to me and said, "And to you, for still chasing that ridiculous dream. We're all waiting for you to wake up and stop embarrassing yourself." The room fell silent, my cheeks burned, but I kept a forced smile on my face. My mother added, "It's been years, and you still haven't brought anything to a family dinner except your sad stories. We're not a charity, and you're not a child anymore." I was frozen in place, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or scream. But instead, I calmly stood up and said, "Thanks for the meal," before walking out into the cold night, carrying nothing but my dignity and a half-finished dream. The air outside bit through my coat, but I didn't care. I walked for hours through empty neighborhoods glowing with soft holiday lights, past families who were still gathered around tables, sharing laughter and warmth, everything I had just been denied. I couldn't shake the words they said: disgrace, embarrassment, as if following my passion was a sin and daring to be different was a crime. I had expected resistance from them. They had always been rigid, obsessed with status and image. But I never thought they'd humiliate me like that. Not in front of everyone, not on Thanksgiving. I ended up crashing on a friend's couch that night. Max had always supported my writing, always believed in me more than I believed in myself. He didn't say much, just handed me a blanket and a mug of tea and let me be. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene over and over, the looks on my siblings' faces, some awkward, some smug, some pitying. None of them stood up for me. I realized then that I was truly alone in that house. My dream had made me a stranger in my own family. The next day, I woke up and decided I would stop trying to prove anything to them. I would write harder. I would push forward with everything I had. That humiliation would be my fuel. I poured every ounce of my pain into my novel, staying up late, writing like a madman, channeling every tear, every insult into the story. The pages flowed like never before. I stopped attending family events, stopped answering their passive-aggressive calls. I knew what they wanted: to reel me back in, to shame me into conformity. But I was done with that. I chose my freedom. I chose my voice. Months passed, and with them came milestones that no one in my family noticed. My novel was picked up by a small but respected publishing house. I was interviewed in literary blogs, invited to panels, even featured in a few local newspapers. My name started to mean something outside of the shadow of my family's expectations. But I didn't gloat. I didn't send them copies. I didn't show them the article with my face on the front page. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about self-respect. For the first time in my life, I was proud of who I was becoming. I rented a small apartment, filled the walls with books and scribbled notes, and began writing my second novel. Life wasn't perfect. I still struggled financially, still questioned myself late at night, but it was mine. Every page I wrote reminded me that I had made the right choice, and still silence from my family. Until one evening, nearly a year later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Carolyn. "I read your book," she said, her voice unsteady. It made me cry. I didn't know how much you were going through. I didn't know what to say after all the silence, after being cast out like a failure. This sudden recognition felt surreal. She continued, "Mom and Dad don't talk about that Thanksgiving. But I think they regret what happened. They just don't know how to say it." I sighed. Regret was easy, apology was harder. I wasn't ready to forgive yet, but I appreciated the call. More time passed. My second book was released, and it did even better than the first. I started speaking at universities, teaching writing workshops, helping others find their voice the way I had found mine. Each time I stood on a stage, I remembered that night, remembered the icy walk away from that house, and I felt nothing but gratitude. Pain had opened the door to my purpose. Then, one day, I received an invitation handwritten on expensive cardstock, "Thanksgiving dinner, my family." I stared at it for a long time, unsure if I was being invited back or summoned. Max said I didn't owe them anything, and he was right. But something inside me wanted closure, not for them, for me. I needed to see if I could face them again as the person I had become. Not the failure they once labeled me as, but the writer who refused to give up. So I went, dressed simply, but confidently. I rang the doorbell and was greeted by silence. Then the door creaked open and my father stood there, stunned. Behind him, my mother's eyes widened, and Carolyn rushed over with a smile. The room looked just as I remembered, elegant, cold, full of pride. Except this time, I wasn't the same. Everyone grew quiet as I stepped inside. I could feel their eyes on me, but this time, the silence wasn't judgmental, it was uncertain. My mother blinked rapidly like she was holding back 1,000 words. My father, ever the stoic one, cleared his throat and nodded toward the living room. "Dinner's almost ready," he said, not meeting my eyes. I sat at the edge of the couch, noticing everything that had changed and everything that hadn't. Carolyn sat next to me, quietly beaming like she was proud to be seen with me now. David, on the other hand, kept glancing at his phone. He hadn't said a word. I wasn't expecting an apology, not from them. But as we sat down for dinner, the tension in the air was undeniable. Turkey was carved, wine was poured, and the conversation danced awkwardly around meaningless topics. Then, unexpectedly, my father stood up with his glass. I braced myself. The last time he did this, he had called me a disgrace. This time, he hesitated. "I want to acknowledge everyone here tonight," he began, his voice lower than usual. "Carolyn, your promotion amazing." "David, keep building those apps." Then his eyes met mine. He paused. "And to you, for proving us wrong." The silence that followed felt like a wave crashing over the table. My mother looked down at her plate, her lips tight. But I nodded. That was enough for now. After dinner, my mother came over with coffee and said, almost too quietly, "I read the book too." That was it. No apology, no praise, just that. But it was more than I expected. For a moment, we stood there in that chilly, uncomfortable peace, the kind that sits between two people who have said too much in the past and not enough in the present. I left that night not with closure, but with confirmation. I had grown. I had healed. And they had finally started to see me, not for who they wanted me to be, but for who I had become. It wasn't until later that I truly realized how far I had come. One afternoon, I received an invitation to speak at a national conference for emerging authors. It was the kind of event where people dressed in suits, agents roamed the halls, and aspiring writers clung to every word from the stage. I almost declined. That old fear, the one planted by years of being told I wasn't good enough, started to creep in. But then I remembered Thanksgiving. I remembered walking out into the cold, alone, unloved, dismissed, and I remembered who I became because of it. I went to that conference, and I spoke like I had something to say because I did. I shared my story, not just about writing, but about rejection, resilience, and rising above the voices that try to silence you. After the event, a young woman came up to me, tears in her eyes. "Your story is mine," she said. "I've been hiding who I am because of my parents." But not anymore. I hugged her. It was in that moment I knew everything I endured wasn't just for me. My journey gave others permission to take theirs. Back home, I kept writing, kept building a life that felt like it belonged to me. The success didn't come all at once. There were setbacks, bad reviews, sleepless nights, but through it all, I held on to the fire that started the night my parents threw me out. Sometimes pain is the soil where purpose grows. I was living proof. 2 years after that infamous Thanksgiving, something unexpected happened. I got a letter in the mail. A real, handwritten letter, something my family hadn't sent me in decades. It was from my father. The handwriting was shaky, and the envelope smelled faintly of the cologne he always wore. I opened it slowly, cautiously, almost afraid of what it might say. Inside were just a few lines. "I was wrong. You were never the disgrace. I was for not believing in you. Forgive an old fool." I sat with that letter for a long time. Part of me wanted to rip it up. Another part of me wanted to run back and hug him. But I did neither. I simply placed it in a small box where I kept pieces of my past rejection letters, my first book contract, a photo of me at my first book signing. That letter joined the collection, not as a reminder of pain, but as a marker of progress. My relationship with my parents didn't magically fix itself after that, but something shifted. We started talking occasionally, short calls, awkward texts, sometimes shared articles. They never became the loving, supportive parents I once dreamed of, but they tried. And in their own broken way, they learned how to show pride. I learned how to stop craving their approval. That was the biggest win of all. I didn't need them to clap for me. I had become my own standing ovation. Now, every Thanksgiving, I host a dinner of my own. It's small, warm, filled with friends who feel more like family than blood ever did. We laugh, we share stories, we toast to failures as much as to success. On the wall behind the dining table hangs a framed copy of the first page of my debut novel, right next to the photo of me smiling at my first book launch. No one in that room ever called me a disgrace. No one ever made me feel small. That night years ago, when I was thrown out in front of everyone, I thought I had lost everything. But in truth, it was the beginning of everything real. That rejection became my liberation. That humiliation became my launchpad. I had to be cast out in order to discover where I truly belonged. And today, I belong in the company of dreamers, of doers, of those who choose passion over approval. If you've ever been made to feel like a failure because you followed your heart, let this be your sign. You are not a disgrace. You are a pioneer. Keep walking, even when it's cold. Keep dreaming, even when they laugh. One day, your story will be the one that saves someone else. And maybe, just maybe, they'll call you brave for the very things they once mocked. That, my friend, is the real victory.